All right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for having us. We brought our coffees. So, um, yeah,
This is Trista.
yeah. So we can introduce ourselves. My name is Trista. As Anita said, I'm an occupational therapy assistant by background. I started out my career working in a hospital, doing acute care at Walter Reed. I met the business owner. She was working at Walter Reed at the time doing driving rehab. Uh, as conflicts died down, they kind of closed down the program. So she opened her own business to help not only our veterans, but also all members of the community. So I joined this team in 2018, and I've seen us grow from a staff of 5 people here in Chantilly, Virginia, to now we have 3 locations: Chantilly, Fredericksburg, Virginia, and Columbus, Ohio, and to a staff of about 20, I'd say, between full-time and part-time. So it's been really a great opportunity to be a part of this team and to see it grow over the past couple of years.
Yep. And I'm Amanda. So kind of similar background. We're both occupational therapy assistants. And I've worked in various settings, hospital, skilled nursing facility, home health, even dabbled in marketing for an acute rehab hospital. But ultimately my passion was to help people and one-on-one, and see that progress and see that growth. So I actually stumbled upon this job in particular, just through Indeed. But I think it's an amazing, occupational therapy in that therapy world, just the health care world in general is amazing because you can just kind of go and specialize in many different areas and still be able to help someone. But I've been here over about a year now, and I love it. And there's so much work and progress that still needs to even be made in this field in particular, just in driving, and so much more awareness, I think, it needs to build and grow. So I'm happy to be a part of that and, help grow the field and just increase awareness overall for the community.
So I'm going to go ahead and share our screen. Let me see. Sorry, bear with me. Here we go.
So we have a presentation, but we'll kind of just, talk as is, not necessarily, read the slides verbatim. And of course, we're willing to share the presentation. Oh,
sorry, I thought I could be fancy and move it to my other screen, and I forgot you can't do that.
And then we have a resource page that we usually add in at the end of the PowerPoint presentation as well. It's not in there currently, but prior to handing it off to you all, if you want to have it for resources, we'll add that page in there as well.
Are you guys seeing the slideshow?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, perfect. So obviously this is our, oh, sorry, what's that?
That was a yes.
I was just going to say, now we're seeing the slideshow.
Okay.
Perfect. Okay. So yeah, this is just, and a little bit about our business. So we are a veteran-owned small business with our flagship location in Chantilly, Virginia. We are unique in that we are the only model like ours where we combined the aspect of the kind of healthcare side with occupational therapists specializing in driving rehab, as well as we have a full service shop where we install any auto adaptive equipment or lifts or things in a vehicle that help people be independent, either with driving or entering and exiting their vehicles. So we are, as far as we know, the only model like ours in at least this country, where we combine both. A lot of places, there are driver rehab specialists internationally in all 50 states. We have a lot of friends in Canada, in Germany, but they typically, it's kind of piecemealed where, one place will do the assessment and then they have to go somewhere else to find the equipment. And Whereas here we have a really robust team where we all work together to make a custom fit for every individual that comes in the door, regardless of what their needs may be.
And then, with us being able to do that all under one roof, and just in our field in particular, we see an array of drivers, many populations. So, and I know this is more specific to the aging population. So, these are just a few conditions that could affect someone's ability to drive. Again, I'm not going to read off the list there. But if you notice any of these changes, have any of these changes, or a loved one, to just kind of look out for, hey, maybe my driving might be affected by any of these items here listed or conditions. So just something to keep in mind, look out for. And then as well, with those conditions or changes come, you can look out for the warning signs too, that might indicate, hey, maybe it's time to look further into this. Should I still be driving? Is this still appropriate for me? Is it still safe for everyone, myself, everyone on the road? And these are just some warning signs that could show up or present themselves. And again, just to be aware of and look out for, especially too, I know we have a lot of family members say, hey, I noticed this, or, maybe we should look into this. So again, not only medical issues that can arise, but these are just other warning signs to look out for. Driving too slow, running red lights, using lanes improperly, thinking I pressed the brake, or, I thought I pressed it, didn't press it hard enough, something like that. Just warning signs that can indicate a reason to further investigate that process and potential of, stopping driving or not.
Yeah. And I was just gonna say, so we get a lot of phone calls, not necessarily from individuals questioning if they should continue driving, but we get a lot of phone calls from children of aging parents, spouses, just, caregivers. So, in a couple of slides, we'll go over our particular process, but, it's always, I joke that we can be Switzerland in a way. It's always good to kind of have an outside objective view to look at it. Loved ones, you're going to notice the changes in your loved one first. However, there is that factor of being almost too close to perhaps the issue or the root of the cause. So kind of having a network or a person who specializes in this particular issue to look at it objectively. We don't know you, we don't know your family situation, we don't know your dynamics. We can look at all of the hard facts, and we'll go over how we come to those determinations.
And that's, again, so along with those warning signs, these are just some examples of how to potentially guide that conversation. So this could be, a step taken before you even seek out a specialist, or, after one, or even with the specialist, us as the driving rehab specialist. So again, just some examples of how to potentially approach that conversation. Never easy to have. But of course, I think, we come at it from a side of safety. Ultimately, that's the goal, is to keep everyone safe and on the road as long as possible. We're not just looking to, get everyone off the road, and that's not the answer we go to automatically. We're exploring all the options. But just a couple of examples if you want to start having that conversation of how to potentially guide it. And like Anita said, so many options nowadays as far as, and then you guys are a huge resource in itself to a ride, potentially, a means of transportation that's not your own vehicle. So here at, our company, we have the Certified Driver Rehab Specialist, or CDRS. So we use that term a lot. And if you go on the DMV website, say someone was reported for some reason, they'll get flagged and put under a medical review process within the DMV within our state. And that person will have to go seek out a CDRS to take an exam with. And so we will show up on the list of CDRSs within the state to undergo a driving evaluation and ensure that that person is still safe to be on the road, in conjunction with a medical report as well from a following physician. But we have the CDRSs here, and we're occupational therapists and occupational therapy assistants, as well as that the side, the shop in the back that has our mobility technicians. They're all trained with the highly trained AMITA certified and quality assurance program training to work on the auto adaptive equipment in vehicles.
So what we do and what I find unique about our model is that we truly do look at everyone holistically. We look at everyone as their own individual case. We can make general assumptions, but we like to really get to find out, because we're using our base of occupational therapy. If any of you have ever gone through occupational therapy, they're going to talk to you about all those activities of daily living, getting yourself dressed, bathing, grooming, and then the, kind of one step further, how are you getting your groceries? How are you getting to and from doctor's appointments? We want to know what your typical day-to-day looks like. How much are you utilizing needing to be independent with driving? How much could you have a family member support you? We do have a lot of customers that come through here that don't have family support. So then we need to tailor whatever our outcome might be to find a way to utilize their community resources versus within their own family or friend network. We do a full clinical and behind the wheel evaluation. So we do a whole comprehensive evaluation. We use standardized testing for the clinical portion, so that we get that objective data. You can't, unfortunately, you can't falsify the data sometimes. So we do have that to have that hard conversation. And then if, depending, and we'll go over what some of the results could look like, we don't just say like, okay, well, here's our results, here's our recommendation. We'll see you later. Don't call us, we'll call you. We want to make sure that we are closing that whole loop and making sure that everyone feels confident, comfortable, knowing what their next steps are.
So oftentimes, people ask, what do I even need? What do I need to do in order to undergo an evaluation with you guys? This is a one-page referral form, and this is found on our website as well. But it's just we'll need it signed by a physician, just stating that you are medically able to participate in that behind the wheel portion of our evaluation. And we like to know, obviously, like Trista said, we're looking at this holistically. So we want to know what's going on with you, your medical history, because that obviously impacts your abilities to drive. Okay.
Oh, you got it.
And again, we can provide this on the resource page at the end of the presentation as well. Oh, I don't know.
Nope. There it goes.
And this just goes into a little more in depth at what to expect. So again, we said the comprehensive evaluation consists of that clinical portion, those assessments, and then the behind the wheel assessment we actually complete in one of our vehicles. We have a fleet of about 5 vehicles now, equipped with a passenger safety brake. So we will go out and do a standard route around here in our area, and we're taking that into consideration as well. It might not be the similar traffic as someone may have near their home, so although, all that goes into our assessment and the outcomes, we take that all into consideration. And we tell people to usually allot for about 3 hours for the evaluation. It could be a little less, give or take, the client, each person's different. And the cost of our evaluation is $800. currently. Another question people often ask is this covered by insurance? So unfortunately, we don't typically see that it is. The insurance companies don't deem driving as medically necessary. It is a choice. So that is our cost there. We do provide our billing codes that we use for the assessment. And we always say, you know, you're welcome to submit it to the insurance and see what happens. But I will say we don't often see it covered. And then we give our evaluation results after the assessment. So at the end of that 2 to 3 hours, we'll sit down and have that conversation with you, you know, your family, whoever you want to be in there, and discuss those results and recommendations. And then we'll also provide you with a copy, and the following physician typically as well. And then on some occasions, the DMV.
And something that we are working on trying to do is, and I would love to work with you all in your network more, is when we do have to make that hard decision to retire from driving, or to recommend retiring from driving. I have to caveat all this. What we do is we make recommendations. We are not a licensing entity. Your state licensing agency is the final one. However, they do, if we need to get to that point where we have to involve the DMV, they do strongly consider our recommendations, but we don't have the authority to take anyone's license away. We strictly make recommendations. So I try to make sure that verbiage is clear. But what we have been working on as we are growing and getting more involved in our communities is coming up with resources specifically for that person's community. Virginia is very robust, and we are very fortunate to live in such a rich area as far as resources goes. And we're trying to compile transportation resources, volunteer networks, things of that nature, because we don't just want to say, okay, well, you shouldn't drive anymore. Good luck, and we'll see you later. So we want to make sure that we are utilizing our whole community. I'll be honest, I'm not as familiar with Arlington County. We're located in Fairfax County, so a lot of the events that we do are focused here, but we're trying to reach out so that we can give appropriate resources and referrals when needed. So that is something that, I would love to continue this conversation as we keep going forward. If you're aware of any resources that we can be providing, I know NV Rides is one that comes to mind. I know they're pretty robust in Northern Virginia, and they do offer either reduced cost. I don't think it's entirely free, but reduced cost for the aging population for medical appointments. So we want to make sure that we're looking at all of those, and so we're very happy to keep working with you on that.
Yeah, and Anita, I had some questions for you too, here in a minute. But these are some of the results that you may see after an assessment. So either resume driving, everything was appropriate, or drive with limitations. Again, we don't want to just say, hey, no more driving. We take all options into consideration, and maybe driving with a night restriction is appropriate and doable for somebody and still safe. Or rehab driver training. So we also do that here. That would be, with one of us. A potential need for auto-adaptive equipment. An example may be peripheral neuropathy in the lower extremity. Someone may not be able to feel that pressure, that sensation on the gas or brake anymore. However, they could potentially drive with a hand control. And again, that would require some driver training potentially to go along with that. But again, just another option. Or not appropriate for driver rehab services, or, retired from driving. And again, we'll assist with education, resources, and then discussions with the family member or need be.
And something that I often forget to highlight is what we call passenger assessments or passenger applications. As we age, we start to seek out more, in our therapy world, we call it durable medical equipment, walkers, rollators, scooters, things of that nature. We also have a lot of options for lifts or devices that can assist you with being independent with stowing those items into your vehicle. And it doesn't have to be the big wheelchair accessible van that you see in the parking lot where the whole passenger side opens and a ramp comes out. They're really streamlining these things. I think from years ago, I remember the commercials with the hover around, you know, at the Grand Canyon looking over. They've even started to streamline those devices into these smaller scooters. However, they're very heavy to lift. And so while you may still be ambulatory, it could be difficult to lift that in and out of your vehicle. There's a lot of really good lift options out there that we offer and install, provide training on using them, and they can be stowed in something as small as like a Honda CRV or a small hatchback, as long as the measurements are correct. I'm gonna say our most important thing, if you're going down that avenue, don't ever buy anything without consulting someone in our industry that knows what the limitations are as far as weight, size, all of those requirements. We never want to see someone buy a brand new vehicle and then find out that it's not going to work for what their needs are. So I'll slide that in right there. Don't ever buy anything without talking to someone in the industry first.
Yeah, a mobility equipment dealer, which is, I said, NAMITA, trained and certified. We'll have that at our resource page at the end there, but that's the national, association for the mobility equipment dealers. And those are the people along in conjunction with the driving rehab specialists that are going to, recommend the appropriate equipment and should be consulted prior to purchasing.
Yeah, but yeah, we still see, even though you may have already made the decision to retire yourself from driving, but now your spouse or family member is driving, but you have to utilize a walker or a scooter or some type of device, we can work with you on that as well. So it's we cover a broad spectrum of people within the driving community.
I have a couple of questions I'd like to jump in with. One of them was, you talked about DMV having the authority to take away somebody's license. And their comment is, well, I use my license to prove my identity. If DMV takes that away, what do they replace it with?
Yeah, so I think we have about 2 more slides if we just want to, we can talk if you're okay. And then because the DMV piece is a little lengthy, so
yeah, that's its own beast.
Yeah, and we'll go over that in full. I figured we could just do our last 2 slides here and then jump in so that we'll have more time for questions and go over the DMV piece.
Okay.
Really, these are just a few setups and a few pieces of adaptive equipment that you see here, and that's a wheelchair accessible van that you see there on the right. But this one in the top left corner is just an example of a hand control, what that would look like. On the left side there, I think it's just a push-pull application. So you would push forward for brake and push back, or maybe even pull back like this, motion of the wrist for acceleration or gas. And then usually with a hand control, we recommend that, I don't know if you see that knob mounted on the steering wheel there, to kind of facilitate the turning, since ideally you're going to have the one hand on the hand control now and the one hand on the steering wheel versus 2 hands on the steering wheel. But just a few examples of what you may see. And we have an array of equipment here at our location, which is another benefit, again, of what we do. A lot of places you'll go see the driving rehab specialist and they will have maybe one piece of equipment or one setup to work with, and that's all they know and can recommend. Otherwise they're not seeing this person with alternative, equipment, and what could be maybe a more appropriate setup for that person or more conducive to, proper body mechanics. So we have, many options here in our location. And again, it's just best to consult, with a specialist. And then if you want to just get install the medical equipment, you do need a prescription first. It is a piece of medical equipment, so you do need that prescription. Same with any medication. And we do that here, along with our evaluations. We're able to evaluate, assess, and properly recommend and write that prescription for somebody. All
right, and then this is just our last slide with our contact information, which I can put up at the end. I'm gonna go ahead and just stop sharing so that,
We can see the box.
yeah.
Questions.
All right, so let's discuss DMV licensing. So that is, so every state has its own set of rules, not, and it depends state by state if they are codified laws, but set of rules, we'll use that term, for driving with a medical condition that could impact your driving. I'm going to assume that we all here are in Virginia, so I'll discuss Virginia's policy. So Virginia is a self-report state, meaning you can report yourself. So when you go in to renew your license or ID, there is a box where it asks if you have a medical condition. You may not even realize it. You may accidentally report yourself. That will then ensue with the DMV sending you a large amount of lengthy letters, scary looking letters.
Automated
They're-
letters.
Yeah, the Virginia DMV is still very archaic with their communication. But what they'll do is if anyone reports you, whether it be a doctor, a neighbor, a family member, or yourself, they do have to follow up under their DMV medical review guidelines. What that entails is they will require your physician, whether it be your primary care physician, your neurologist, whatever specialist you're seeing, but a doctor that is familiar enough with your case and comfortable to fill out. It's like a 11 or 12 page form stating your medical stability when it comes to driving. So medications that could impact seizure disorders, things like that. If the DMV determines that further information is required, or if the doctor writes that they are not comfortable saying beyond a shadow of a doubt that you can drive, then they will require you to undergo a driving rehab evaluation with a CDRS. In the state of Virginia, you do not have to report any of these conditions, but even we've had customers who go in, especially we were getting a lot when people were trying to get the real ID, and they were.
That's what Pat just mentioned.
Oh.
So that is an option instead of a
Mhm.
license, you get a real ID and they accept that as a form of identification.
Yeah, so it's
now.
just it's a state validated photo ID card that it has nothing to do with driving. So you can get that if you have chosen to self-retire from driving, or once you do retire from driving and the DMV does ask you to turn in your driving license, then they will provide you with a state photo ID. That you will still need that for voting, for travel, for things of that nature. We tend to follow pretty closely with the Virginia DMV guidelines. It is a very gray area, unfortunately, because DMV does not have, or Virginia DMV does not have hard metrics in place. Now, funny, Maryland, right next
Or
to us,
DC.
or DC, have entirely different medical policies. Maryland is a mandatory report state. There's about 13 or 14 diagnoses, diabetes, neuropathy, vision changes, stroke, limb loss. You are mandated to report to the Maryland MVA. So, and we're trying to look through the.
And there are fewer states overall that are those mandatory, self-report or report states. So there are more that you don't have to necessarily report. I think there's only maybe like 7 or something like that's a small percentage of, out of the US total, that you have to report the conditions listed, on the website there. But do you want to?
So let us know if that is any further clear. Like I said, unfortunately, Virginia is very gray. I wish that we lived in a state that had, more clear guidelines, because it also makes it difficult for us to, I can't say to someone, oh, you're required by law to do this, because you're not. However, we also, as licensed medical providers, hold the right to, if we see that there is a safety issue, to also report to Virginia DMV.
Yeah.
We always let anyone know up front when we are going to send that report into the DMV, because we do feel that there is a medical concern. it may just be because once you're under Virginia medical review, your doctor has to send in something annually to say that you either have or have not had a change in medical status. So if we feel that, let's say an assessment that we just did, given whatever their medical diagnosis is, that for the time being, they should and will continue to drive as they were, that we still want them to be under medical review so that there's kind of a system of checks and balances so that they're not just going under the radar or, you know, because we can't force you to come see us every year.
Right.
We want to know that someone is following your medical condition as you continue to progress.
Thank you, Carolyn, retiring from driving.
You had a question when you were talking about loading mobility devices in and out of a vehicle. You said, you know, don't buy anything without talking to somebody in the industry. You were talking about don't buy a new car, right?
Vehicle, right.
Correct.
So-
Yes.
so
Or there are devices that you can purchase on the internet. Amazon is wonderful. However, you can also purchase things that aren't the right fit. We aren't trying to gatekeep information. We have a unique way of measuring vehicle to mobility device to tool that helps get the mobility device in and out of the vehicle, because it's like a 3-piece process. So if one of those pieces isn't correct or works correctly, then you're going to be back at square one and typically end up spending more money than perhaps you maybe needed from the go. So,
And could potentially be a liability issue as well. For
Yeah.
instance, a hand control that you can purchase on Amazon or whatnot, any
Yeah.
website there. You know, the insurance, if you get into an accident, the insurance potentially won't cover it because this is not, you know, you don't have a prescription. This is a piece of medical equipment, and it wasn't installed correctly.
So if I'm going to buy a piece of mobility equipment, and you've made recommendations, you know, you can buy this or this or this. So I can then turn to you and say, well, I have a Honda CRV that's 3 years old. Which of these will fit in it? And you guys can tell me, yeah, buy this,
yeah.
that.
So we have a unique system because we are partnered with so many manufacturers. I don't know if the official name of it is called the Mobility Matcher, but we call it the Mobility Matcher. So we can put in a year, make, and model of a vehicle, the scooter, wheelchair, or device that you have, and the piece of equipment that you are looking at to have it lift that piece of equipment in and out of your vehicle. And we'll get you know, like a big green, like yes, or a red no. If so, and then it will say like, you know, which piece is not correct. And, you know, do you need to get a different scooter? Do you need to get a different lift? Or is that vehicle, you know, we are starting to see as we phase out, I'd say vehicles over 10 to 15 years old, we are starting to see phase out of being capable of fitting some of the newer equipment. It's still not impossible, but we are seeing as we age out of those like 15-year and older vehicles, they're not as user friendly.
Okay, and we had a question here that asking if A&V has don't we have a list of resources for retired drivers? You know, Star Transit, Metro Access, taxi discounts, and Anita answered with, yes, we do. Call the office or email them and you can get that list. We've also had them give us coffee and conversation presentations once or twice. It might be time to revisit that and see what the new capabilities are, but
Yeah.
Arlington
and
has a
for
pretty
us,
menu of possibilities for getting around.
I
Yeah,
wish
if
I wish I could cut and paste the website I just looked at on my phone, but I can't get that website into the chat here. But if you search arlingtonva.us, there is a brochure, 20 pages, called Transportation Services for Older Adults and Persons with Disabilities, 20 pages. And it, you know, I'm surprised somebody hasn't already put in the chat our favorite program, which is the seniors taxis.
Well, somebody mentioned that.
Okay, half price. And my favorite thing now that I is my senior smart trip Metro card. I paid $1 on Metro fare to travel from Dulles Airport to Virginia Square.
That's wonderful. Yeah, and those are the things that we are always looking for, because even though if we say, you know, our recommendation is to retire from driving, and maybe you sell your car and you no longer have that expense, it can be equally as expensive if you travel a good bit out of your home per month. So we want to make sure that we are, you know, helping our clients remain fiscally responsible, and always looking for resources. And I know that Metro access is wonderful, but I know that everyone has their beefs with Metro access sometimes, either being late or just not showing up. So, you know, we're always looking for other resources to say if Metro access is not working for you or does not come to your area, you know, here's something else, because that's always the go-to, but I know that they can be inconsistent, unfortunately.
We had a comment early on when you were talking about helping people give up their car keys and retire from driving. And one of the things you mentioned was putting the Uber or Lyft apps on their phone, and you know, so that they can call when they need to. The comment here was, we have a lot of members who don't have smartphones or aren't that tech savvy, which can make that kind of hard. Do you have any alternatives to suggest to being able to, you know, whip out your smartphone and call up the Uber app and get a ride?
So that's where we look within the community to see if, you know, I know NV rides can be called via a landline or a phone and set up. If they have family members or caregivers who are involved, there is an app called GoGo Grandparent. It's a kind of a silly name, but it gives someone else the ability to order the ride for them, track their location, know when the ride has shown up and picked up the person when they've gotten dropped off at their location. So I think we're starting to see some more of that. Again, it does take a third party almost to be involved, but if they have someone in their network, we're happy to educate them on that. It kind of gives someone else the ability to assist them with it. Or we do recommend, you know, local taxi cab companies, because those can be called via a landline. So yeah, there are still resources, as long as we know that not having the smartphone is a barrier, that we can kind of tailor our recommendations to that and make sure that we're pulling the appropriate resources.
I have a question here. Do you do driver road simulations? You talked about being out on the roads around you, but do you have simulators that people can try out?
No, we don't have a driving simulator. Some other programs utilize those. And again, there's not many in this area. I know like Inova Mount Vernon had that at one point. They no longer have a simulator. And, you know, sometimes within the state, the driving, like the DMV, some programs may not accept that simulator as part of the, you know, sign off to say that someone is competent behind the road and still safe. So we just go to the real thing. It's the best way to assess, I think, someone is behind the road, and, you know, being there, able to gauge their clinical ability to, you know, make those decisions, those executive decisions, you know, if something were to happen. So a simulator can only tell you so much. We do utilize for appropriate clientele. We have an app that we utilize. It's called Drive Focus, and that is a simulator in a way. It's like a first person behind the wheel. It's almost like a video game, but it's an app we use, and you know, someone has to go and identify road hazards and what we call critical items, maybe, you know, stop signs, red lights, pedestrians, stuff like that. So we utilize that in our plan of cares sometimes as a precursor, you know, prior to going out on the road, to make sure someone's able to, have that reaction time or, separate the visual versus motor functions, and can combine those two to piece them together so that to demonstrate they are appropriate on the road. So it just depends on each client, and what their needs are. But that's why we have a fleet of, many vehicles and many different setup options. So we can actually engage an appropriate setup for someone behind the wheel, and make sure they're still safe on the road.
Okay, just so you know, we're about 7 minutes to 11. A
Mhm.
couple of people have posted phone numbers and websites for the county's driving resources. Comment here, somebody who had to retire from driving and switch to Red Top's simple phone number using his landline. So,
Oh, good.
you can't buy, the dumbest portable phone you get, you can still put favorites in it. So you can
Yeah.
put taxi cab and, things like that in it. So another comment that the VA has a driving simulator.
Is that for the Washington DC VA? I'm not sure if they still have theirs, but I have not, since pre-COVID, have not been down there to talk with any of their driver rehab specialists. But unfortunately, that's only accessible for veterans as well.
I have a general question here. Do seniors have more accidents? Do you know?
I know that there is a lot of research being done. I don't want to give a hard yes or no, because there's, I think, for equal amount of research that's done on older drivers, there's the same amount of research being done on novice drivers. So depending on what the objectives are, we are fortunate that we are involved in something that's offered through Virginia, the state of Virginia National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. Every year we receive a grant for older driver evaluations. The drivers have to be 65 and older, living in the state of Virginia, in Northern Virginia. I forget how many counties it encompasses in Northern Virginia. And outside of that, they qualify for the grant. It reduces their out-of-pocket cost for the evaluation, and we submit outcomes to the Virginia, it's Department of Aging and Rehab Services, as well as NHTSA. The only data that we're submitting is their age,
Demographic.
their, just demographic information, nothing identifying. We have not seen results of that. That has been ongoing, I believe, since 2016 or 17. I'm not sure how long they're doing that research for, but that should be hopefully coming out sooner rather than later. But we haven't seen any results from that data that they are collecting. I know they are doing it across the entire state of Virginia. I would say that just by a general rule of thumb, you know what, I still don't feel confident nowadays with smartphones, and I just don't know if you can pull one particular age demographic as far as accidents. I know that right now we're living in a time where there are more accidents on the road than historically there ever has been, but what those factors are, I don't feel comfortable giving you a hard yes. I'm sorry, Anita, I don't want to.
No, I'm curious because I do feel like COVID, and people have returned to driving after COVID with weird, terrible, awful habits or craziness on the road that it doesn't seem we had before COVID.
Yeah,
That may be me. And then pedestrian car accidents are on the rise, bikes, scooters, Vespas, motorcycles.
I think it's an easy general assumption to say that the aging population may have more accidents.
I think it's because of the certain medical conditions that coincide with, aging in general. And I think they chalk it up to that as, with these conditions, your percentage percentage of accidents or, increases by this much.
Yeah.
Not necessarily just geriatric in general, but I think it's the conditions, the comorbidities that, affect those results or outcomes.
I think that's very well put. And I think we're almost ready to close here. Gary, did we
I have one last question. Smart, driver assist technologies are advancing all the time. Smart cruise control, adaptive, lane keeping and smart braking.
Autonomous vehicles.
We're a long way from autonomous vehicles, but all of these other things can be an aid to somebody's driving. Do you guys look at any of that? Do you ever do an assessment for somebody and say, right now, the car you've got, you probably are at risk, but if you get one that does smart braking and lane keeping, you're probably okay? Or are you going to start assessing those things?
I have a very different take on that. I'm a firm believer that technology fails.
Yeah.
Our vehicles are not by any means new. Our fleet of training vehicles, we have a 2015, 14. We don't utilize any of the smart features in that. We need to know that people are still able to have those instincts, the reaction time. I'm gonna start coughing.
What if, yeah, we teach, we go back to the basics. When I'm doing training with someone, I'm not training them on utilizing the camera to reverse. We're actually teaching them the techniques, the steps, what am I looking for? Reference points, needed to complete that maneuver without technology. What if you were traveling and had to rent a vehicle and that vehicle didn't have those features in it, or your car broke down and you had to utilize another vehicle and that car does not have those features in it, so I mean, it's something that we're considering, and maybe in a small scale, potentially, like automatic blinker shut off. But
we don't discourage people from using them in their own vehicles, but when we are doing our assessment, we need to know that the cognitive component to knowing when to use your correct turn signal or the correct stop distance between you and the vehicle in front of you, we need to know that those cognitive components are still there.
Will translate to any situation.
Yeah. So
Well, this is.
I like what Pat wrote. They actually can be a huge distraction. I remember, like I mentioned, we do the whole spectrum of driving. We had a young driver with a learning disability, but completely capable of driving. But the parents went out and bought him a brand new car with all the bells and whistles and this and that. And the first thing we did is we drove back to the dealership and we said, teach us how to turn all these off. He was a young man, 17 years old, just learning how to drive. We wanted to know that he was going to learn how to drive and not rely on all of those bells and whistles. And, I know I've been in my own car and for a minute, I didn't know I did something and this thing started dinging and I'm like, I don't even know what that is. Right. And so we do try to limit those distractions, especially for people who are prone to
anxiety. I was about to say, and it strictly depends on the medical conditions, right?
Yeah.
That you're dealing with. Someone with anxiety should not have that additional stimulation and distraction while driving. So
that is very interesting, and it really gives us a little reassurance that if we learn to drive carefully and we keep those good habits up, that's going to take us a long way.
Yeah.
Amanda and Trista, this has really, really been eye-opening and this is very useful. Great presentation, a lot of information. I hope we're going to stay in touch. If you ever guys come in person to Arlington, we should probably set up with Wendy Zanker. I also give you the name Rachel Coates, or the transportation people in Arlington County would very much like to know about you, I'm sure.
Yeah, we would love it. Thank you so much for having us.
I had 1 or 2 questions for you, Anita, but I can just address those in an email if that's more.
I'll stay on the Zoom after Gary stops recording.
Okay.
Okay.
Amazing.
Well, yeah, thank you all for joining us.